Greetings and welcome to Liminal Light, a show that explores the languages of myth and star, earth, sky, tongue, and spirit through weekly astrological forecasts. I'm your host, Chris. Enjoy. As Venus enters the second phase of Libra on the 22nd, the themes shift from justice, fairness, and accord to bonds between people and unions of all kind. Two hands upstretch into airy aether, maybe backed by a display of charming clouds, and are lashed with white satin, ribbon, or smooth linen cord. Wrapping the hands, they are bound, and also the wills of those who clasp palms and intertwine fingers. Regardless of the pair's familiarity, this is close proximity, and if perfumes dress the skin, they are certainly in each other's noses, as pheromone and flesh must also be. Not all such bindings are done in love, but in Libra they are romantic nonetheless. And on this occasion, they take on such a character. As Mars enters Libra, they become the bound oaths of warriors, even if they are dances to death made famous by Michael Jackson's Bad. They are in the vain, elegant displays of ballet. As long as Venus is in Libra, we'll likely see good Mars, the honorable warrior and battle dancer who is well balanced on their feet, even when the tempo's hot. We know some mano-a-mano knife fights settle larger disputes and stand in for all-out gang warfare. This is a compromise for egalitarian Venus in Libra, but one the hostess might make if the quiet stabbing in the basement goes unnoticed, the elaborate ball upstairs that is remembered fondly by all in attendance. Mars might not reach such heights of severity until Venus is ingressed into Scorpio on November 7th. Instead, he might simply avoid conflict in a manner that sends obvious messages, including hard stares across the dinner table and wielding moods as weapons, passing the punch bowl, dropping some read-between-the-lines stabs during his inaugural speech, maybe intentionally popping the champagne cork in someone's direction, or deliberately overpouring someone's flute. Bad boy. Venus probably does well to hide these splashes in her bustle, or even better, make them over into charming spoofs that summon chuckling from the throng while still somehow stroking Mars's ego. Mars, you are simply too proficient with weaponry to handle a thing like that. It intimidates us. You don't even know your own strength. It reminds us of your most recent victory against the so-and-so and so forth and such. This is still a situation, even if it's one that is under control. It's handy for Venus to dress the lieutenant up in party clothes and have him under surveillance in a place where he can't turn to sidearms and bayonets, although it does detract from the pure Venusian nature of the affair. Mark Antony and Caesar's visit to a soirée detracts from the central subtlety of the bacchanal. It grows crude and rigid at the edges and loses some of its swan-necked articulation, less running nimble hands over delicate ribs and more gorging on grapes. This is secondary tier concerns for the hostess, as Venus in rulership is still Venus in rulership, snags or no snags. The day following Mars's ingress into Libra, the Sun ingresses Scorpio on October 23rd, with Mercury sliding into Scorpio's second decan just after. Predator eyes set aglow, fierce and fixed. They cut the night with purpose and intent, sending invisible beams through the darkness, the cones of their own dilation. They see what they salivate for, as if it were real, and use their knowledge of the world to draw these objects to them, whether they be craved out of hunger or lust, gluttony or hubris. Whenever the sun enters a water sign, a pool is lit luminescent, and whatever its nature does glimmer. In Scorpio, it is the eerie glow of subterranean ponds, caverns, springs that steam and stir, the colloidal depths of our beings penetrated by our desires to transform ourselves in primordial immersions. For Scorpio, there is no turning back. The waters melt you. You mingle with the primeval serum. Your DNA in cavern chrysalis is corrupted, but only in the context of the past. As you step from your bath and stretch your new legs on the other side, you find that the environment that awaits you down the opposite end of the tunnel suits your nuanced mannerisms and strange appendages. You've mutated for the better, even if you will never again be who you once were. Part of the process is the dive. We descend into the tunnels of winter as darkness slowly swallows light during Scorpio. We descend into winter, and it is there that we are suspended in alembics, in distillation. The sun is the viewer, the voyeur, spying on beings or souls' metamorphosis. Scorpio is a fixed sign. It desires to lock and apply tectonic pressure that results in real change as well as ejaculations of magmic rock. There is a terrifying refinement that occurs at the center of Scorpio, but at its initial portal is the primal instincts of predator and prey, or animals in rut, pursuance and self-anointing instincts that end up in us covered in secretions and drugs. Cloak of poison that activates as our pores open to the bath, us and the allies in a mortal tangle. We become one with the wart. This is not unlike the protagonist's descent in altered states, and can certainly become trajectories outlined in Andrzejew Zulawski's Possession. Scorpio isn't required to always end well, but it is a necessary process of life. Not all who place the coin fair in Charon's bony hand succeed in what they seek. These themes dawn on us to some degree when the sun enters Scorpio. We are reminded of how our lusts define our actions and narrate who we are and what we might become. The fatality of our fixations. We are all willing to die for something, even if that is our own life, while some of us simply, or not so simply, might live for our own deaths. Vision and virtue meets coherence in mind-expanding philosophy not far from the labyrinth gate. Our messenger and translator already up ahead, describing the internal chambers that he's found. He becomes obsessed with the glyphs carved into the walls. They are recipes, he suspects, ideographic grimoires and manual tablets, the detail of the process of metamorphosis. Absolutely enthralled, he is consumed, and all that comes through the walkie-talkie is the angular cadence of archaic tongues. Parlance cyclic and argot rhythms bind ears and eyes to lexicon letters lit by torch-end points so the phonemes sizzle out the flame wisps until all you can see or hear or say. If lucky enough, another like you lurks within the ventricle vault. Then you might volley to your heart's content. But in Scorpio, hearts are never content. There's just more desire, more need to lock and change. So the infatuation eddies into a vortex, and it is from there that demons of mania are born. Strange entities that surround ideas, ghosts in the machine, sentient information, haunted notions that go legion, fed on trajectories of thought and loops, modulating vitriol and Klein bottles. With Jupiter, the Sun, and Mercury all in Scorpio, it is likely that the obsessions bear fruit, which as it grows broadens the perimeters of our mind. There is focus, vision, coherence, optimism, detailed attention, patience, and neutrality, all turned toward the Scorpionic. This is an odd pairing to Venus's MO in Libra, but it is the classic recipe that results in Hallows Eve celebrations and festivities throughout place and time. The throwing of ghoulish, underworld-themed parties that obsess on sex, death, and debauchery. Mercury probes onward and pushes toward Deconic space linked to the fixed star Acrux, the smallest constellation in our sky, perhaps a representation of the cross of matter, which Bernadette Brady points out is likened to angles which set a native to their unique zodiac. The starfire it will feed Mercury with causes him to focus on physical form and the art of concrete manifestation. Mercury falls deeper into love with the Scorpionic methodologies, and perhaps his mercantile significations activate. I think we've got something here. Practical schemes to capitalize off tumultuous internal transformation, maybe offering clients a traumatic experience that is guaranteed to cause permanent personal change, or at least the tools and tech to accomplish the task for sale at use at home. Hermes progresses into the orb of his star's feeding fire as it passes by trine circuitry to Neptune in Pisces. Neptune usually befouls Mercury's prerogatives, and this might not be an exception, although it might not seem like it until later. Our aforementioned violent mutation outfit might seem sensible and sane, and even downright lucrative, while we're tossing the football around the office. But our square of space rented from the Yellow Pages might be clipped and posted on the office bulletin board later, merely for the sake of lampooning and roasting. Sorry for the archaic jargon, but remember, Mercury's infatuated with the archaic and obscure subject matter, for better or for worse. This can certainly be and includes communication with others, where people's combined trips equally delusions not capable on their own. This is interesting with Venus still in Libra, more than happy to draw up contracts cheerfully and with artful flair, the plumage fluttering with each swoop and scallop of the nib. Jupiter's presence in the sign might pack enough expansive and enduring confidence that the adventure succeeds somehow. So crazy it just works. That would suit Jupiter's conjunction with the Sun well on Jupiter's Day, October 26th. Here, vision and identity, authenticity and virtue centralize and align their aims with mind-broadening coherence of scorpionic philosophies. This is like stepping into a celebration of Georges Bataille and Charles Baudelaire's work. For the period of a day, principles of decadence, transgression, and degradation are upheld and observed with reverence and considered virtuous. We know that such events were held perennially, such as Saturnalia, throughout both ancient and recent history, and fit the Halloween season quite well. This marks the center of Jupiter's direct motion, and even though he has already recently passed into a new sign, this is the official beginning of a new cycle of philosophical growth and expansion. On this day, for insights into the depths, our shadow selves and interior terrains, be willing to integrate with what is within and beneath with the character you play each day. Let your robe of pure white become black as soot or red as blood, so that you may know what you could otherwise never without experiencing for yourself. This is the part of maps marked by dragons, or those annealed in the heart of darkness, or Apocalypse Now, and their ilk. The jewel eye of the Sphinx refracts the sun's rays, and enlargens the light, revealing multitudes of tempered glass hidden in the potential of the sand, each grain an alembic in which entheogens can be isolated and distilled, their bulbous forms expanding with the blower's breath, like the wind that lifts balloons, raising Tartarus up so it fits into and fills the Smithsonian. The earth and its cultures exhibited as they truly are, naked and pornographic, violent and oppressively vicious, contorted and obsessed, but somehow sublime still. The program of Umberto Eco's On Ugliness. As we walk its halls, we suddenly find ourselves, as there are no glass barriers or velvet ropes or motion detector alarms or gallery guards, we engage and identify with what we find there. As the moon reaches half fullness, we shift up a gear and oscillate with increased intensity at the pivot of our wobble. And like the business end of a pestle, we ruminate in Aquarius, in the days when the moon trespasses the dragon's tail, this entire year in a double sextile, to one side Saturn and to the other Uranus. As Kronos and Prometheus, along with Caput Draconis' loose grand trine, has persisted throughout 2017, a subtle yet softly ringing bell, or sleeping circuit disconnected, no longer fully functional, but something we can open up, peeling back the protective shell and looking in as an anthropologist from another time might look into the diode scramble of a Hammond organ for ontological meaning, centuries after our species' own slipped into extinction. Circuits were to become loose enough to be free agents in the air. Could systema akin to astrology take place in the space between two upraised hands, like the ball of chi coddled and molested by an MDMA rolling raver? Mercury sextiles Pluto on the 27th, maybe looking down into the dark recesses of the scorpionic glyphic chamber and a reverie of mystery, similar to our anthropologist who examines the leftover apparati of ourselves long MIA and connects the dots with dreams, much like the ancients did with our own living sky and its loose circuitry of constellations. Venus also squares Pluto here, maybe suggesting that the themes are becoming too dark for her gala gathering to hold together. The guests growing introspective wander off, or in a state of obsession pair off to conspire and chew ears, and maybe more. There is a hole in the domed ceiling of the ballroom, and in filters stardust, entheogenic drugs from heaven's reverse, the upswept downdraft of angels of the jungles, as well as snowflake insects that like UFOs spiral to the floor and mesmerize with cold circuits, rigid patterns that form at random and display creation's proclivity for repeated numerological happenstance, the apophoniacal horror of Ernst Haeckel's art forms in nature. Venus is in rulership. Though there is an alarming hole in the structure above their heads, it is far from the wine and banquet spreads, and the music is quite distracting, as well as all the beautiful bodies twirling Busby Berkeley. Some can be distracted, but not all. Some leave their bodies behind and project through the breach, leaving the society pages for whatever awaits beyond the back cover of the book. Okay, I'd like to welcome back to the show my co-host Bonnie.
Hello.
And we'd also like to welcome our guest Markus Lunkenheimer, astrologer, musician, etc.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome, Markus. It's wonderful to have you here. On Liminal Light, our third guest.
Oh, this is the third one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or third guest.
Yeah, it was just me and Bonnie riding it for a while. So, yeah, we're talking about the astrology starting on Sunday, October 22nd, which is when Mars enters Libra.
Yes,
Venus enters.
Which I have natally. Mars in Libra is paradoxical.
Yeah, definitely paradoxical. I found that one hard when reading for other people to try to describe it to them.
I think it fights for the gray area. So it doesn't necessarily want to win. Not maybe the most competitive placement for Mars. Like it's more badminton than football.
I love birdies.
It's like sword fighting for the beauty of the art and not for the gore of the puncture wounds.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's like the other side of it that I wasn't thinking about. Like, I guess I was, how have I been thinking about it? I've been thinking about kind of, especially because Venus is in Libra, that Venus is constantly kind of like bouncing Mars, where Mars would want to do these almost passive aggressive things, and Venus is like, no, like let's keep everything nice, and like just kind of making up kind of ways to like turn everything Mars does into something that's like kind of charming and funny for all the other guests, but while still kind of making Mars feel good, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being hosted.
Yeah, being
by
hosted.
Venus.
Yeah, totally. And also I was describing it kind of as like the knife fight in Michael Jackson's Bad, you know, where it's like, because you get that part of Mars that's before Ares was a god of war, it was a god of dance, and those early warfare, you know, when it was not like mechanical kind of moving battalions around, but it was all very much like warriors with spears and those kind of weapons, and it was all martial arts, you know, and it was all kind of like capoeira-esque, like war, dancing war, and you dance to get ready for war and get hyped up for war, and then dance while you were fighting. So that's like maybe kind of like the part of Mars that's more tapped into, it's like there's the performance and some of the aggressive maneuvers, but they're more for the arts culture side of it than the fighting side of it,
Definitely capoeira.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
pronounce it?
I guess so, yeah.
Beat it for sure.
Beat it. Totally.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
And then we have Monday, October 23rd, the day following Mars ingress into Libra. The Sun ingresses Scorpio on the 23rd, with Mercury sliding into Scorpio's second decan just after.
Yeah, I keep thinking about that kind of as, because Jupiter's already been in Scorpio for a while, that you get that kind of perplexing philosophy that would be present in a psychological drama you're watching with Jupiter, and you keep being like, man, these are such weird ideas. You keep thinking about it and talking about it, and then finally when the Sun comes in, it's like your friend comes in and he's like, I think I understand it, and he's like, I kind of get it, and tries to explain it to you.
Yeah.
It's like when you suddenly get Twin Peaks, You're like, I think I understand.
Some of that Jupiter and Scorpio stuff is already playing out on social media with the Me Too thing, which
What's
is
that?
it's people posting the words Me Too to acknowledge that they've had been assaulted or have some kind of situation in their past. So it's sort of like this brave revealing of trauma that we're all taught to be ashamed of, and that feels very Jupiter and Scorpio to me.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I definitely noticed that topic coming up more, but I wasn't paying attention to the social media enough to catch the hashtag or whatever the lingo is.
It's worth it to sometimes go into the search part and see what everybody else is talking about besides people that you know. Yeah.
Yeah, and you definitely, especially for astrology purposes, you can sometimes see these crazy, it'll just follow right along with the themes. I definitely noticed that I pointed out a while back, there was something going on with Saturn, and then there was just everyone, it was like Saturn, and this was months ago, but it was some aspect with Saturn and Neptune, and then everyone was posting photographs of graves, where it's just it's just so clear sometimes. But yeah, you can always pick up the social media version of the astrology. It's such a good net for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder if Mars moving into Libra will take some of the oomph out of what Jupiter's doing in Scorpio.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too, or just giving it a different. Yeah, oomph is a good way to put it, because that's pretty rough exploration right now, but then making it more culturally palatable, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't necessarily see Mars in Libra as passive aggressive, but it can be passive and avoid conflict.
Yeah, passive aggressive is maybe the wrong way to put it. I feel like that maybe that comes up every once in a while, but it's avoiding conflict, but then sometimes what happens when conflict's necessary, absolutely necessary.
Yeah, it can be a good mediator for conflict.
Yeah, because you do mediation to a degree, right?
Uh-huh.
And that's part of your natal placement and part of your career skills.
Yeah, I've got Pluto and Mercury and Venus and the midheaven all in Libra. So I think when Pluto is there as well with Venus, there's kind of the art therapy.
Yeah.
That happens.
Yeah. That's cool that you have it on the midheaven. I have Libra on the ascendant, and then and with Pluto and Mercury and Saturn, and then I feel like I understand Libra in this really backwards way. That's not what people normally think of as Libra. It's that Saturn version of Libra,
That exalted Saturn that's got both of the rejoicing conditions of sect. You can see that in your writing, though, with Mercury and Pluto there.
Yeah,
too.
definitely. Yeah.
It's like sort of like magical, transformative, poetic writing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's weird that it comes out in the ascendant, like that's like, because it's not like that's, you know, when you think of like the your first face or like first impression, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe not if you see me on the street, you know, or maybe I don't know.
Yeah, people don't always see the Pluto and Saturn right away.
Yeah, because I guess because they're slow, right?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that speed of how time feels, and I feel like while Saturn's been in Sagittarius, time has felt like it's moving faster.
Yeah, right, totally.
And that will kind of calm down once Saturn moves into Capricorn in December.
Yeah, I'm really excited for the move into Capricorn. I think that's going to be really interesting.
There's such a winter feeling as well, where there's not as much happening in the winter, or something about just settling in and just being able to not engage socially as in the same way that you would at this time of year.
Yeah, Saturn ingresses right when things just naturally grind to a halt anyway for people, you know, in the northern climes.
Yeah, hibernation time.
Exactly.
But yeah, looking at people's charts and seeing, I've been really just like, almost everyone you read for, you're like, oh, what's going to happen when Saturn goes into this house, you know?
Yeah, we both been studying zodiacal releasing, so Saturn being called the greater malefic and Mars the lesser malefic, and Jupiter the greater benefic and Venus the lesser malefic has like another layer of meaning when you think about the amount of years for those time periods ruled by those planets.
Yeah, I guess the years does really put it into perspective, because I can easily see Jupiter is the greater benefic and Venus is the lesser benefic. As you know, if Venus comes to help you, it's like, oh yeah, you know, this is hard right now, but here's some stuff that feels good while that's going on. But when Jupiter comes to help you during that period, it's like, hey, here's some understanding that'll help you get out of this problem, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But with Saturn and Mars, I guess it's like, you know, I'm gonna break your arm right now, but that's all I'm gonna do. But Saturn's like, your life's gonna suck for the next 3 years, you know. I guess that's in one way it's greater.
I love taking Saturn and Mars energy and putting it into something that it works. I've been really thinking about that a lot lately with aspects that seem terrifying whoever you read or whatever you come up with from looking at the charts. It's just that, oh, this is going to be a hard time, but taking that energy and the feeling of that time and putting it into something that makes sense, so it doesn't necessarily, or just so that you can use it to its greatest advantage.
Yeah, always trying to do something useful with it when it comes up, instead of just trying to like duck and avoid, you know. I think that's because it's gonna hit you like wherever you're hiding, you know?
Last week there was
make
like
some angsty artwork while
Yeah,
Mars is in Libra.
Yeah.
or even like last week there was like a Mars Saturn thing happening, pardon me, but I stacked wood for a few hours.
Yeah, it was the square. Right?
Yeah, it was a square, and and it didn't even feel like I was doing. It didn't feel arduous. It didn't feel like, oh, when is this going to be over? It was just like I was in there. I was just stacking wood. That's all that mattered, and it felt good. It just, there was something that worked so well for me in doing that.
Yeah, just
so,
like exertion or industry over time.
Yeah, that's one of my goals when I read these.
Yeah, we should do around the new year. We should do like a terrifying aspects and configurations of the new year episode. Because I've noticed a couple that I'm like, whoa, you know, that I think I might get them wrong if I say them off the top of my head, but I think January 9th is going to be, there's something really, if you haven't checked that one out, I would check that one out. And then there's I think it's like the lunar eclipse in June or July. I think July, that one looks pretty rough too. But yeah, so what's up next for this week that we're talking about now?
On Tuesday.
The Sun-Jupiter conjunction.
Yeah, the Sun-Jupiter conjunction. Yeah, and I think that's cool because Jupiter already moves in to Scorpio a while before that. We're already there, and then by that point, beginning the new philosophical cycle, you know?
Yeah, it's October 26th.
Yeah.
At 3 degrees Scorpio. Here in the Midwest, the Kazemi will happen around noon. I think that is with a Sagittarius rising here, but I think it would be Capricorn rising where you're at. So it'll be a 12th house Kazemi in the Midwest, which is where I have my Scorpio. So it's going to happen right on my North Node Uranus conjunction.
Oh wow!
I'm excited.
Yeah, totally. That's definitely a cause for excitement. What are you planning on doing?
I don't know. I'm thinking it'll probably be, I'm hoping for an epiphany.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
something.
Yeah, it's definitely possible with like the Uranus there to get like the eureka moment,
Uh-huh.
Yeah, like revelation. I was just listening to another podcast that was talking about a lot of the moves forward in science. There's tons and tons of documentation for it being revelation moments, that people just, while they were sitting around waiting for something, they just got it, everything clicked, and maybe you'll come up with like, free energy, or
the next penicillin.
Yeah, the next penicillin. Yeah, totally. I mean, you could maybe do the groundwork, if you just start thinking the next penicillin now and then just wait. So then what do we have after that? Then I guess the big thing after that, or it's not huge, but on the 27th we have Venus square Pluto while Mercury is sextile Pluto. And
Mercury and Venus will have a contra Antisha.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I was meaning to get around to check Antisha and contra Antisha, but I hadn't yet. Cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. And that's, a couple days before Halloween. And I know you were wondering, Bonnie.
About parties on the 28th?
Yeah, about parties on the 28th. And this is the day before the 28th, but it'll color it. Bonnie was thinking, since the 28th is Saturday, so many people are going to be trying to celebrate on that day. So what's the astrology for that day? But it seems like the action is really the day before, and this stuff will just be separating at that point. But you definitely see, every time I think that we're enough away from an aspect, or you're just like, oh, it's separating, it's okay, I'll see evidence of it just occurring a day later or 2 days later pretty strongly.
Yeah, it still should be strong on the 28th.
Yeah, and it's definitely a Halloween-y vibe, where you have like the void, the beyond, like everything you're afraid of, everything that's unfathomable, clashing with Venus's project of socialization and charm and being a hostess and arts, culture, and then Mercury being like, well, that's cool, that's all right, we can collaborate with that energy. And then like I see Venus, I see how she feels about that, but we're like, we can still communicate that. It's definitely like a good energy for, I'm not planning, and I don't know anyone who's planning on throwing like really terrifying haunted houses or like screening a bunch of horror movies, but it's definitely like okay, yeah, we can like communicate this horror even though it kind of makes people squeamish.
I spit on your grave style.
Yeah, and that keeps coming up. I noticed in the social media too, like specifically that genre, where people are starting to question, like you're saying, Marcus.
Well, that's related to the Me Too.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Where you brought up the Me Too thing, that people are starting to question the ethics of horror movies, but leading up to Halloween, there's going to be, and everyone, that's going to be a major part of social culture where a lot of people are feeling like resistant or in resistance or in protest to a lot of the themes that have always classified kind of the common narratives of horror movies.
Right. I saw The Brood last night.
How was that?
Which is a kind of a, it kind of relates to this whole, these transits in Scorpio, because the character, like the female lead and the mental institution, it's her anguish and whatever she's upset about. There's like these babies she gives birth to that, kill the people she's upset with.
Right, yeah.
Wow.
You remember that movie, right? At the end it escapes into the sewer tunnel, right?
Yeah. Not clearly.
That's like an early Cronenberg movie, right?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. So when you said Cronenberg, then it all clicked into
clicks.
place because it's like
Which
the
one?
aesthetic is so specifically his.
Yeah, and that's kind of like.
I wonder what his chart is like.
I know. I haven't looked. I don't know if there's a verified birth time for him. Have you tried to look at his chart before?
I think I have, but it's been a long time.
Yeah.
It's like one of the first 3 that you looked up. Like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because we get the Kazemi, and then it's, you don't often think about it, but I've found evidence every once in a while to look at Jupiter as kind of like the swelling belly of pregnancy,
Mm-hmm.
And it is interesting.
It's exalted in Cancer, so that
totally,
sense.
exactly. Yeah, I've like specifically seen that in people's charts when they've been wanting to have babies or about to have babies, or had someone have like a 5th house perfection, and then they were like, am I gonna have a baby? And then their birthday was coming up, and the next perfection was Jupiter in Pisces, just like watery expansion. You're like, oh yeah, that's probably what's gonna happen,
Yeah, perfection I've been using in readings more frequently now. And it seems to really work. I'm kind of a walking, talking proof that perfection works.
Yeah, I definitely think it works.
So I think my Mars is so debilitated and conjunct Pluto that it's every time I have a perfected martial year, that's when sort of destructive, transformative events occur.
Yeah, I definitely see that. As soon as I picked up on that technique, I looked back 12 years on almost every year I could think of, and I could see parallel themes. And then I think it works so well to give people a project for a year, and you don't even have to look at their chart. You can just ask them how old they are and know if it's going to be about relationships or about sociality or about money or about their home or whatever, and usually people will be like, that's totally what's going on with me right now,
Mm-hmm.
Which kind of, it's so similar to the way zodiacal releasing works, to just think of your life as a oscillating circle,
Yeah, it really helps if people have a timeline of their own history.
Yeah, it's
because some people just don't pay attention to years and events in their lives like I didn't used to, but now I try to.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it all relies on whether or not you keep track of when things happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of a weird one that's not really, I don't see as something that's really going to come up in be a big effect on people for this week period, but I was just kind of looking at, I don't know if you've thought much about it. It hasn't been tight the whole time, but how we've had this grand trine for all of 2017 between Saturn and Uranus and the North Node, and just how that splays across the chart in that triplicity, and then every time, because of that, every time the moon goes across the South Node, it's a sextile to Saturn and Uranus, which I thought was just really interesting. That it's like every time it goes past, the dragon's tail, and there's this, even if it's not an eclipse moment, there's this kind of reminiscence of materiality and material associations and material things being kind of like drained away, and a more ascetical kind of moment, because it's like even just like a couple hours of the day when the moon, whatever phase it's in, is willing to collaborate with that kind of Promethean innovation and experimentation, and simultaneously with that kind of end game version of Saturn trying to just like do that final drive across Sagittarius. And then I don't know, I didn't notice it until this week, but that it kind of characterized the year to a degree, kind of like a silent passage every 29.5 days or something.
Yeah.
I guess I've just been thinking a lot about the nodes, like you won't see a lot of when there's an aspect to it unless it is an eclipse, but there are these kind of like ghost moments or something.
Mm-hmm. You said that you've been trying out the zodiacal releasing with different celeb charts. Was there any ones that stuck out?
I haven't looked at too many celeb charts. I've just been kind of throwing it at like whoever I've been currently talking to. But you've checked out.
Have you been working with celeb charts?
Yeah. Let's hear some celeb stuff.
Let's hear some celeb facts.
Just because their lives are documented, and there's like release dates of albums, and it's really easy to follow.
Yeah.
I did Black Francis of the Pixies recently, and he had zodiacal releasing during the release of all 5 Pixies albums.
Wow.
And there'd be like L1, L2 releases, or L1, L3 releases of these dates, and then the loosening of the bond occurs, and that's like when the Pixies went on tour with U2, and I guess it was awful. And they're not on like speaking terms, and they do their final album, and I don't even think they're in the studio at the same time. And then the releasing stops, and his like everyman persona emerges, Frank Black, which starts out kind of quirky, but it becomes sort of like everyman bar rock.
Yeah.
And he becomes kind of ignorable.
And Kim Deal just takes off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when you say it's releasing and then stops releasing, you mean it's like in a peak period, like it's in one of the cardinal the cardinal cross with the part of fortune?
Yes. Releasing from the lot of spirit, being angular to his lot of fortune.
Okay.
And then once the L1, level 1 releasing ends, it's like he decides to make less sophisticated arty music. And
Yeah.
And then people sort of forget about him.
What other celeb charts have you looked at? Because you looked at Aphex Twin, right?
Yeah, he had like 13 years of no official releases and no live performances, and then he moves into an L1 zodiacal releasing period, and it's like right around then is when he releases an album, and then another album, and is performing live again, and puts all his music available for free on his website, and much more visible. what's the words are volitional eminence.
Yeah, volitional eminence. Yeah, have you looked at yours and seen you hitting a period of volitional eminence way later in life?
4 months into my 43rd year, so not too far away.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it looks like
Looking forward to it.
mine's like more like, I can't remember exactly, but it's more closer to when I'm at like 60 or in my 60s or something.
It's quite far away.
Or like the last one's already passed and the next one's then, but it looks better than the one before. So it's kind of interesting, you know, where you're like, oh, maybe everything I'm doing is working up to something.
I am not familiar with zodiacal releasing. I have not been taking this class. So could you please expand on what L1, etc. is?
Yeah, Marcus, do you want to just do a quick, like, how zodiacal releasing works and what it is for the...
Yeah, it's perfection and zodiacal releasing are Time Lord techniques that are really based on your natal chart. So they bring the natal chart alive as a timing technique, and the level 1 periods are, 8 years to 30 years long. So they're huge portions of your life, seasons. That's what they were described as.
Right, yeah.
The class we took. And then L2 periods are...
Yeah, either seasons or like series or like a whole series of books. Like the whole... They'd be like the books of the Lord of the Rings or something, right?
Yeah, L1, level 1 would be books, and then L2 would be chapters, and then L1 would be, paragraphs.
Yeah, like scenes and stuff. So you calculate it by finding, depending on if it's a night chart or a day chart, the distance between the sun and the moon, or the moon and the sun going one way or the other, and then you extend that from the ascendant, and then you find your part of fortune and your part of spirit, and they're symmetrical in the chart. They're going to be the same amount of degrees away from the ascendant going one way or the other way, and then you start releasing from the part of spirit, and that the amount of time allotted to each planet, which is based on its synodic cycles, basically. You follow that around, so you can be like Venus will be like an 8-year period, but like Saturn in Aquarius will be like a 30-year period. And so some people will be only in their second period, right now, if they're in their 20s to 30s, and some people of the same age will be in their like third or fourth period, which is pretty crazy. But you go back and look at the dates, and I've been looking at people's transits and seeing transits that are coming up, and if you sketch out someone's transits for the year, and you're like, oh, you have like a bunch of stuff happening in October, and then you have a bunch of stuff happening in December, so that's what we're going to talk about. And then you look at their L4 periods, like their periods in their L3, L2, whatever. Just you look at all their periods, and you'll see a lot of the same dates that are coming up in big transits are right where they're shifting periods. So it's pretty crazy how accurate it is that you're like, oh, something really nuts is happening right here. And then if you just check the ZR, you're like, yep, that tracks it too.
Wow.
Which is pretty crazy, because for the listener that doesn't know all the technical jargon we're talking about, it's basically just like, if you think of like a natal chart's like a circle, and your life takes place on how many successive years that are 365.25 days, and that you're if you just say that's 360 days to make it circular instead, and then later you do the equation to correct it to the appropriate amount of days, so circular back to actual days. I was explaining it to a client the other day, and they said, oh, how clever. It's like, don't give me credit, give Vedius Valens credit, right?
Right, or you'll get the curse.
Yeah, you'll get the curse.
I do know about that part of the class.
Yeah. You do know about the Valens curse.
I
Yeah, I
wish
figured
had
we.
it in front of me so I could read it.
Yeah, could you please read
Oh
it?
my goodness.
Let me see if I can get it on my phone without hanging up with you. Hold on. No, I can't bring it up.
Okay, yeah.
But
Well, we'll
it's
have.
really worth reading out loud.
Yeah, we'll have to do an addendum to the episode where you come back and we just talk about Vettius Valens' curse. But yeah, we have about 8 minutes left. Is there anything else we want to say about this week period, the 22nd to the 28th?
Is there anything extreme, either in good or bad moments, that you two would like to warn us about? Or
To me, it just looks
key
like
us into?
a lot of like perspective shifts. It seems like a lot of like kind of paradigm shifts that are kind of perfectly timed around, because Halloween or Samhain or however you're gonna express
Hallows
it
Eve.
is a cross quarter day, so it is linked into that this one of the 8 solar days of note where things shift and gates open and close, and so it makes sense that you're going to get these this kind of paradigm shift around that period and moving into more scorpionic stuff. And that's one thing I did want to mention, the 24th, where you have Mercury conjunct the fixed star Acrux and trine to Neptune right when it moves into the second decan of Scorpio, where Mercury can get really stuck on obsessing about subject matter, and Mercury really usually has a hard time with Neptune, but it's a trine, so I kind of was imagining it like it's like if one person is, because it's also obsessing with subject matter, and especially getting obsessed with subject matter, locking in with someone else who shares your obsession, that and a crux, the fixed star, has this connotation of that, like really opening up Mercury's mercantile and like money-minded significations, that it's this moment where two people could really think they're scheming the best business idea that anyone ever came up with, but then they realize later, maybe too late, that they were both totally tripping, like
Well, we've all been there, right?
yeah. Like you're kind of fine, but then when the other dude who comes in who's obsessed with the same thing you're obsessed with, you're suddenly like, yeah, totally, and this and this, and then you just get carried away, you spin each other out of control. That was just kind of a weird one that I kind of noticed right in there, kind of the 23rd to the 24th. And that's right where the sun goes into Mercury too. So it'll be, into Scorpio. So it's kind of like scorpionic subject matter. Like I was saying that it's almost like the business you think you should create is, you bring people in and cause them trauma so that they can go through positive life transformations, which I just read an article about today that was from the New York Times about that. What is it, like Nexim or whatever, that corporation where they were like branding people, and putting them through this thing so they could like succeed better and be more empowered.
Oh, wow.
And like they got
shut down.
or I don't know if they got shut down, but there's been a big expose. I'm not saying the name right because it has like, the name doesn't look like what it spells, but it's like corporate seminars, and they had like it's the same thing like you were talking about, like Me Too coming up. It's like a women's group that like the CEO of the company is made everyone call him the master, and they had to.
It's a women's group led by a man.
Well, it's just like a corporate group, but they had like a special sorority within it that they were like basically this kind of MK Ultra style, like slaves and branding people, and then people were like escaping.
I'd like to read that article. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, Alkistis posted it from Scarlet Imprint.
Cool.
There's some, I don't know much about the fixed star Spica, but I think there is, on October 30th, there's Venus Spica conjunction, and I
Oh,
was looking
cool.
at it. So it might be like a good opportunity for a talisman.
Yeah.
Do you know that Chris's birthday is on Halloween?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Isn't that exciting?
Bonnie's excited.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good Halloween. Jupiter.
What?
and
I love
Scorpio.
that. I love talisman tips. So you're saying October 30th.
Yeah, I could get you more details on it. It wasn't my election, but I'm a part of a group where people share possible talisman elections.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we definitely want to do more of that on the show. I like Spica. It's Spica is like in the sidereal zodiac where they used to, or maybe they still do. It spikes the start of the year. It's like the push pin for the start of the zodiac. And I think it always, even in the tropical conceptualization, it's like what spikes the layers of the 9 spheres together to the Earth. It's like where you have the firmament and all the spheres of the planet spiked through Spica. It's like the kind of the pinpoint. Yeah, that's. Go ahead.
My connection's starting to get wonky.
Okay.
That's perfect
cutting
because
in and
we are at
Yep.
the end of our time. Do you have any sort of internet presence if any of our listeners would like to find you?
Yeah, give us a website.
Oh, I don't have a website, but if they're interested in a reading, I'm in Minneapolis, and my email is soakingrasps@gmail.com.
Great.
Thank you for listening to Liminal Light. Our theme music was composed by the ever-talented Asa Irons. This week's background music was by Mar Habrine, performed by today's fabulous guest, Markus Lunkenheimer. I'm your host, Chrissy Puchere Ropucci, and you can find me at atavisceral.com, atavisceral.com, where I post articles and forecasts, offer chart readings and talismanic concoctions, occult services, tarot, divination, and more. Omnis spiritus rexergat pax voluntas fiat voluntate mea.
Adieu et bonne chance, mes amis.